Today, I'm talking about wealth building. And in this video, I'm going to share my own financial freedom story. I'm also going to talk about budgeting, getting debt free, have an emergency fund, talk about some different retirement accounts, and then also whether you're purchasing your first home or investment properties or starting a business and some other considerations. I'm going to discuss what that all looks like from a 10,000 foot view, and I'm going to keep this relatively simple. And for me, it all started in 2015. I was a successful personal trainer, and I had this awakening where I recognized that the personal training business model is a terrible one. And the reason it's a terrible business model, no offense to you personal trainers out there or other wellness professionals that adopt this model, but the reason it is inefficient is you are exchanging your time for money. And I recognized that there was only so much I could charge my fitness students per hour, and there was only so many hours in the day. And it was really difficult to leverage my time to increase my value and ultimately my worth. And I was in Jackson Hole in 2015. It was March of 2015 with my great friend, Paul Koulis. And I had this grand epiphany. And I recognized that when Vail Resorts came out with the Epic Pass during the recession, they had an all-inclusive ski pass to all of their ski resorts, and it was very affordable, and it increased the inclusivity of a historically exclusive sport. And I recognized that there were younger skiers that were of lower socioeconomic statuses that were buying the Epic Pass, but they didn't have any place to stay here in Vail, Colorado. They couldn't afford the luxury hotels that we are typically known for. And I decided to open Vail's first and only boutique hostel, the Bunkhouse. And my wife, Nancy, at the time, and I formulated a business plan. And we raised equity through one of my great fitness students at the time. And exactly just over a year later, May of 2016, we opened the doors to the Bunkhouse, where our guests spend money on cool adventures, not expensive hotels. And unfortunately, 6 months after we opened the Bunkhouse, Nancy and I decided to part ways and go through a divorce. And while we are good friends, business partners, and we co-parent very well to our son Nash, it put a financial toll on both of us. And I had to start all over again I was 37 years old at the time. And the Bunkhouse wasn't making any money. It took a few years before it started to make money. So I had continued my fitness training business at the time, and I was barely able to afford a condominium in Edwards. And as soon as I bought this condo, I immediately, upon closing, went in and took the master bedroom and tore it apart and built a third bedroom in the master bedroom. So I took a 2-bedroom, made it a 3-bedroom, and built a loft and a living space in the garage. That's right, in the garage. My 5-year-old son, Nash, and I, at the time, decided to live in the garage and rent out the condo as a short-term rental on Airbnb to create cash flow to pay off the consumer debt that I inherited, my school loan, and to get on a path to rebuilding my retirement account. And that was an impactful time in my life because I had focused with extreme dedication to creating a legacy for myself and my son. And it was only until I had a plan put in place that put me into the situation that I am in now. And today I'm going to share with you those strategies that I took that anyone can do. It takes a lot of discipline, dedication, and time, but regardless of your income, you can build financial independence, and you must start with a detailed written plan. And it all starts with you must know what your income is. Annually, monthly, weekly. You have to understand your expenses, your fixed expenses, your variable expenses, and you have to live on less than you make. It's that simple. You live on less than you make, and you have to increase your income and your value to the world over time. It's really that simple. And the abundance of money that you make above and beyond your expenses, you use that money to invest into tools such as retirement accounts, investment real estate, or businesses that will appreciate over time. There's really no secret to this. It just takes some planning and some work. So the first thing that you need to do if you're just starting out is you must get out of debt. The only debt which can be good is if you have debt on your home or an investment property or a business that is gaining value. Some debt can be used to your advantage, and I'll talk a little bit about that more. But all debts except for your home, investment properties, or business must be paid off as soon as possible. So credit card debt, school loans, personal loans that you've taken out, car payments, these things, there is no reason to be in debt. You again, above and beyond your home or businesses, you must get out of debt, and you want to use the debt snowball effect. And this is how it works. As an example, let's say that you have a $5,000 car payment, and you have a $10,000 school loan, and you have a $20,000 credit card payment. The first thing you want to do, regardless of how high or low the interest rate is on any of these debts, you want to start with your smallest debt first. So in this scenario, if you have a $5,000 debt, a $15,000 debt, and a $20,000 debt, you want to take all of your disposable income above and beyond keeping the lights on in the house, and you want to pay as much money as possible on that smallest debt and make the minimum payments on the secondary debt and the third debt. You want to make certain that you pay off the lowest balance first. And the reason that is it will teach you to win with money. And when you win with money and you complete the task, you get a dopamine response in the brain, a positive feedback loop that builds momentum, and you can learn very quickly that you too can win with money. And then once that smallest debt is paid off, you snowball the money that was employed to pay off that debt. You snowball it into the second debt with the same enthusiasm, and then ultimately you pay off the third debt. And whether it takes you a year or 2 years, it obviously depends on what your income is and how much debt that you've acquired over the years. But you have to, I mean, even if you have to think that if you sell everything, you live on, as Dave Ramsey says, beans and rice, rice and beans. You must figure out a way to increase your income, get a second or third job, lower your expenses to the bare minimum, and get out of debt as soon as possible. And why that's important is not only are you paying high interest on these debts, that can make it almost impossible to get out of them. You don't have any additional cash flow in your monthly budget to be putting money into retirement accounts that grow in value over time, or into businesses that you can start, or real estate that all gain value. They're appreciating assets that ultimately compound over time. So the name of the game of getting out of debt is freeing up cash flow in your budget so that you can have money to invest. Once you are debt free, you want to have 3 to 6 months as your emergency fund. This is not a vacation fund. This isn't a fund to buy a car or a toy. This is for emergencies because it's going to rain. The dog is going to get sick. Your child is going to outgrow his sporting equipment, and life happens. It's going to rain. It rains on the just and the unjust alike, and you want to be prepared when that happens. And that money, you don't touch it. You merely touch it if there is an emergency. 3 to 6 months. And at that point, if you don't own a home already and or you haven't started investing into retirement accounts, this is the time to start. By the way, if you have been investing into retirement accounts and you have consumer debt, including, again, credit cards, school loans, car payments, it is advisable that you stop investing into those accounts until your debts are paid off. So once you have your detailed plan, your debts are paid off, you have your emergency fund, it is advisable, depending on where you are in your retirement planning, whether you're in your 20s or your 40s, it can be different on how much money you put into these accounts, but a good general rule of thumb is to invest 15% of your income into retirement accounts. And I'm going to talk briefly about the different types of retirement accounts that are available to you. And the first one is if you're an employee for an employer, you're a W-2 employee and you're working for a company. Most relatively large employers will have a 401k employee or employer-sponsored 401k program. And these are programs where you take pre-tax dollars from your pay and they are put into a pool of generally mutual funds that are diversified, and the employer will match a percentage of what you put into these accounts, and they will grow year after year through your retirement years. And I'll talk about appreciation and generally what the returns are on these accounts towards the end. But a 401k, if you're working for a company, is a great place to start. You also have 403b accounts, and these are similar to a 401k, but for public schools and certain nonprofit organizations. You have solo 401k plans that are for self-employed individuals with no employees. Pension plans that are usually found in the public sector, like fire personnel, police officers, government jobs, working at the post office, etc. And then outside of those, you also have traditional and Roth IRA accounts, and there are a few differences between these. A traditional IRA account is when you take pre-tax dollars and you put into an account that's, again, diversified through funds in the marketplace, and you pay taxes on this money. I believe it's after 59 and a half years when you can start taking them out. But I could be mistaken. Correct me if you're listening. But you will pay taxes on the distributions of that money when you take them out during your retirement years. Versus a Roth IRA, you're taking after-tax dollars in today's value, after-tax dollars, and you're putting them into this Roth IRA, and that money will grow throughout your years of investing in it. But when you retire, you don't have to pay taxes on that money, and that is often advisable because we don't know what the taxes are going to be, and we know that because of inflation, $1 million today isn't going to be $1 million 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 40 years from now, wherever you are in your wealth building journey. There's some advantage there to Roth IRAs because of the tax implications years down the road. And then there's also considerations with these IRAs. In 2025, I believe it's $7,000 is the maximum contribution amount. And if you're a single tax filer, if you make over $161,000 a year, and if you're married, filing jointly, I believe it's I think it's $246,000 a year. If you make over those thresholds, there's a limit to how much you can put into a traditional or a Roth IRA. And then there's also SEP IRAs, and these are for small businesses or even single employee S corps and LLCs. I contribute to one of these for my real estate business, and you can put in it is pre-tax dollars. But the thing that's nice about a SEP IRA is you can contribute up to $69,000 a year, or 25% of what you pay yourself. And it will lower your taxable income by such. But the downside is there will be a tax hit when you take this money out during your retirement years. And these are all very, very simple strategies. And typically, regardless of whether it's an IRA or a SEP account, these things generally appreciate about 10% a year. When you invest money into these funds that are diversified through the market, namely the S&P 500 over the last several decades, generally appreciate 10% a year. And this is why it's important to start as early as possible, because compounding interest, as Albert Einstein said, it's the eighth wonder of the world. As you gain momentum and put more money in these accounts, they gain value. And for example, if you have $100,000 in one of these accounts, on average, it's going to earn you $10,000 that year without doing anything else or putting any other money into it. Once that account gets to $1 million, it's going to make you on average $100,000 a year, and it's going to compound and continue to grow. The key takeaway here is you want to start investing as early as possible and spend as much time in that market so that it can gain value over time. The last account that I'll talk about that's also advantageous is a simple brokerage account. And you can open one of these through Vanguard, Charles Schwab. There's a couple of companies, Fidelity. The nice thing about a brokerage account is that you can open these and you can pick and choose different stocks, mutual funds, bonds, treasury bills, and a lot of them have risk tolerance. They'll give you an idea of what their average return is in the last year, what their historical average is, and you can pick these funds. And the thing that's nice about them is you can take the money out whenever you care to. You don't have to wait to retirement age. There are tax implications. You will pay taxes on distributions, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. The thing that's nice about these brokerage accounts is that you can self-manage them and you don't have to pay fees on top of them. And then, because this is a real estate channel and I'm a real estate professional, I'm going to talk about the equity proposition that you can get into when you purchase a home, whether it's your primary residence, an investment property, or a second or third home that may be a vacation home. And for the sake of this initial part of the conversation, I'm going to talk about your first home purchase and just make some assumptions. So let's assume that you've got a plan, you're out of debt, out of consumer debt, you've got an emergency fund, you're putting money away into a retirement account. The next benchmark is to save up 20% for a down payment on a home. And why 20% is such an important benchmark is that when you put down 20% on a home, you don't have to pay private mortgage insurance. And private mortgage insurance is simply an insurance policy that protects the bank in case you default on the loan. And oftentimes, private mortgage insurance can be hundreds of dollars a month. If you can't put down 20% and you're in a good financial position, you can usually get approved for FHA loans where you can put as little as 3.5% down, but you will have to pay the private mortgage insurance on that. Key takeaway when it comes to buying a home and assuming that you're not paying cash for the home and you are going to get a mortgage on this property is understanding your debt to income ratio. And this is what banks look at in terms of your performance and their willingness or unwillingness to loan you a mortgage for the home. And typically, banks and mortgage lenders will underwrite up to 50% of your debt to income ratio. So for example, let's assume that you make $10,000 a month and you have no other debts. You don't have any alimony payments, child support, credit cards, car loans. You don't owe anybody money. Typically, the bank will loan you, in this case, up to $5,000 per month to go towards that mortgage payment that will include your insurance, your homeowners association dues, and your taxes. Now, let's assume for a moment you do have debt and you make $10,000 a month and you have, let's say, a $100 minimum credit card payment a month and you have a $900 car payment a month. So there's $1,000. Then in that case, the bank would loan you up to $4,000 a month for your mortgage payment that would include your insurance, taxes, and homeowners association dues if applicable. And a note of caution here, though, just because a bank will loan you up to 50% of your debt to income ratio, will loan you up to 50% of your take-home pay, doesn't mean it's advisable. There are certain circumstances where it could be, but just note that if you borrow up to 50% of your income, you're likely to be house poor, and you're not going to have any disposable income to invest in these retirement accounts, to take a vacation, to buy new clothing. You're going to have to, you're not going to be going out to eat much, and you're going to be living a simple life. But on the flip side, when I had bought my condo 8 years ago, I was at a 48% debt to income ratio, and but ultimately it worked out in my favor because the property has more than doubled in value, and I have paid down most of the debt. I don't owe much more on the home anymore, and it's exploded in value, and it served me well. But it didn't come without sacrifices. Again, I lived in the garage, and I didn't take a vacation for, I think, 4 years, and there was, I drove an old beater car. I still do, and we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. But you're just not going to have a lot of room in your budget to do other things. So just understand that when you go to buy a home, typically 20 to 30% debt to income ratio is a healthier place to be. You don't want your mortgage payment much more than that to give you some financial flexibility. And but this is where the magic can occur in terms of building wealth, and why real estate is such a good vehicle for building financial freedom. Typically houses, depending on your market, won't necessarily appreciate as much as the stock market. Usually homes don't appreciate 10% a year on average. Here in Eagle County, we're in a very expensive, highly desirable zip code. And here, since 1987, according to Land Title Company, the houses in Eagle County, on average, appreciate 8% a year. So we just use that as an example benchmark, and where the real magic happens with home ownership is that let's assume that you decide to purchase a $500,000 condo. Now that's at the very low end of the market. In today's marketplace in 2025, you can buy a condo for $500,000 down in Eagle, well, gypsum.0. But for the sake of conversation, let's say you buy a $500,000 condo and you put 20% down. You put $100,000 down on that condo, but you're gaining 8% appreciation, not on the $100,000, but on the value of the home. And so if the value of the home's $500,000, in that first year on average, you're going to gain $40,000 just by owning the home for the $100,000 that you invested. So you're gaining a 40% cash return on the money invested. And is that right? Did I do that math right? It's been a long day. Yeah. So on the $100,000, I'm sorry, rather on the property, you're gaining 8%. You just made $40,000. Yeah. On the equity of the home on paper, and it only cost you $100,000. So technically, yes, it's a 40% return on the cash. I am correct on that. So at any rate, that is the key to building wealth when it comes to real estate, is that you can use the bank to leverage their money to gain an equity position that you otherwise couldn't gain in the market. When it comes to investment properties, the same rules apply. You purchase an investment property as a strategy to build wealth, and you have renters, and they're paying down the debt service through the rents every month, and hopefully the rents that you can collect from them is above and beyond the mortgage payment, the debt service every month. So you have free cash flow that can propel other investments, and while the renter is paying down the debt service on the home, it's gaining value. And the other thing that's nice about real estate is it's heavily tax sheltered. If you were to sell an investment property and you buy a property that is equal to or a greater value to the property you just sold, you can perform a 1031 exchange and you don't have to pay capital gains taxes on it. And you can do this in perpetuity and completely avoid paying taxes on this. And your renters, again, are giving you cash flow from the property, and you're gaining equity as that property goes up in value and the debt service gets paid down. The downside to investment properties is understanding the risks. And there's always going to be risk in any of these strategies when you're investing money, because there are no guarantees. But the biggest risk is if you have vacancy or a tenant that's not paying, and you're not getting rent for several months, worst case, or maybe best case, a few months. And are you able to cover the expenses on the debt to service it, so that the property doesn't go into foreclosure and you're in a pickle where you have to sell it or the bank repossesses the home? So just understand that risk when you consider this. And just some final considerations about financial independence. It takes time, it takes patience, and a lot of discipline. And part of those considerations are things like vacations and luxury items, designer clothing, expensive jewelry, car payments. We all have free will, we all have choices to make, but just remember that a lot of these luxuries in life, unless you really can afford them, again, this is my sole subjective opinion, but most people, unless you have a net worth in the millions, at least $1 million, I think, shouldn't be driving brand new cars. Cars, they depreciate in value, they're expensive. Any of these items you should pay cash for. You should never borrow money on a car. You shouldn't lease a car. you're paying interest on something that's dropping in value, and just understanding that you have to make sacrifices today. Dave Ramsey always says this: live like nobody else today so you can live like nobody else tomorrow. And it takes discipline, it takes planning, and you must understand that it's going to take sacrifice and time. I hope this was all informative to you and that you got something out of it. And stay tuned for more real estate tips, lifestyle tips, and wealth building advice.